Trump's ploy at the United Nations is American imperialism masquerading as a peace process. The Trump administration is pushing an Israeli-crafted resolution at the UN Security Council this week aimed at eliminating the possibility of a state of Palestine. The resolution does three things. It establishes U.S. political control over Gaza, it separates Gaza from the rest of Palestine, and it allows the United States, and therefore Israel, to determine the timeline for Israel's supposed withdrawal from Gaza, which would mean never. This is imperialism masquerading as a peace process. In and of itself, it's no surprise. Israel runs U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. What is a surprise is that the United States and Israel might just get away with this travesty unless the world speaks up with urgency and indignation. The draft UN Security Council resolution would establish a U.S.-UK-dominated Board of Peace, chaired by none other than Donald Trump himself, and endowed with sweeping powers over Gaza's governance, borders, reconstruction, and security. This resolution would sideline the state of Palestine and condition any transfer of authority to the Palestinians on the indulgence of the Board of Peace. This would be an overt return to the British mandate of 100 years ago, with the only change being that the United States would hold the mandate rather than Britain. If it weren't so utterly tragic, it would be laughable. As Marx said, history repeats itself, first as tragedy, then as farce. Yes, the proposal is farce. Yet Israel's genocide is not. It is tragedy of the first order. Incredibly, according to the draft resolution, the Board of Peace would be granted sovereign powers in Gaza. Palestinian sovereignty is left to the discretion of the board, which alone would decide when Palestinians are, quote, ready, unquote, to govern themselves, perhaps in another 100 years. Even military security is subordinated to the board, and the envisioned forces would answer not to the UN Security Council or to the Palestinian people, but to the board's, quote, strategic guidance, unquote. The U.S.-Israel resolution is being put forward precisely because the rest of the world, other than Israel and the United States, has woken up to two facts. First, Israel is committing genocide, a reality witnessed every day in Gaza and the West Bank, where innocent Palestinians are murdered to the satisfaction of the Israeli Defense Forces and the illegal Israeli settlers in the West Bank. Second, Palestine is a state, albeit one whose sovereignty remains obstructed by the United States, which uses its veto in the UN Security Council to block Palestine's permanent UN membership. At the UN this past July, and then again in September, the UN General Assembly voted overwhelmingly for Palestine's statehood, a fact that put the Israel-U.S. Zionist lobby into overdrive, resulting in the current draft resolution. For Israel to accomplish its goal of Greater Israel, the United States is pursuing a classic divide-and-conquer strategy, squeezing Arab and Islamic states with threats and inducements. When other countries resist the U.S.-Israel demands, they are cut off from critical technologies, lose access to World Bank and IMF financing, and suffer Israeli bombing, even in countries with U.S. military bases present. The U.S. offers no real protection. Rather, it orchestrates a protection racket, extracting concessions from countries wherever U.S. leverage exists. This extortion will continue until the global community stands up to such tactics and insists upon genuine Palestinian sovereignty and U.S. and Israeli adherence to international law. Palestine remains the endless victim of U.S. and Israeli maneuvers. The results are not just devastating for Palestine, which has suffered an outright genocide, but for the Arab world and beyond. Israel and the U.S. are currently at war, overtly or covertly, across the Horn of Africa, Sudan, Somalia, North Africa, Libya, the Eastern Mediterranean, Lebanon, and Syria, the Arabian Peninsula, Yemen, and Western Asia, Iraq, and Iran. If the UN Security Council is to provide true security in accordance with the UN Charter, it must not yield to U.S. pressures and instead act decisively in line with international law. A resolution truly for peace should include four vital points. First, it should welcome the state of Palestine as a sovereign UN member state, with the U.S. lifting its veto. Second, it should safeguard the territorial integrity of the state of Palestine and Israel, according to the 1967 borders. Third, it should establish a UN Security Council mandated protection force drawn up from Muslim-majority states. Fourth, it should include the defunding and disarmament of all belligerent non-state entities, and it should ensure the mutual security of Israel and Palestine. The two-state solution is about true peace, not about the politicide and genocide of Palestine or the continued attacks by militants on Israel. It's time for both Palestinians and Israelis to be safe, and for the United States and Israel to give up the cruel delusion of permanently ruling over the Palestinian people.
大家好，我是主播周玉琴。很多的朋友告诉我们，太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌帮助了睡眠品质。现在呢，进一步推出晚安加强版，添加了首创最适合台湾人体质的天然 GABA、色氨酸、茶氨酸、香蜂草4大天然草本助眠配方，强化睡眠全期都起到放松舒眠的效果。太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌，它本身就含有台大专利授权克菲尔乳杆菌 M1 等8种专利菌，首创益生菌、益生元、后生元黄金3角配方，帮助维持消化道的机能。有季节敏感、代谢困扰、关心异常细胞风险的好朋友呢，可以选择原版的太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌，它添加有超级食物羽衣甘蓝，健康再加分。而有睡眠困扰的朋友们，赶快选择蓝色包装这一款晚安加强版，绝对是更有感。选择太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌，做好日常保养，实现睡眠自由，身体轻松无负担。每日克菲尔，时刻美好 ，Good Feel Good， 请上快点购为健康下单，而且要记得输入推荐代码，有额外的折扣优惠。